Commander Jack Paper cut Magil Cutie slumped in his ergonomically designed chair, which had been specifically calibrated for human spinal comfort by the Galactic Council's Furniture Accommodation Committee. The fact that it felt like sitting on a bag of angry squirrels told him everything he needed to know about the Council's commitment to human integration. Point of order, squeaked Ambassador Zust of the Silicon Consciousness, their crystalline form vibrating with what Miliki had learned to recognize as barely concealed terror. The human delegate appears to be sighing, according to historical record 7,249b. Human sighs often precede acts of extreme violence, such as declaring war or requesting to speak with the manager. Magil raised his hand with exaggerated slowness, watching with grim amusement as several council members flinched. I assure the honorable ambassador that this is merely a sign of fatigue. This is, after all, our 157th meeting regarding Earth's admission to the Galactic Council. Fatigue, shrieked High Counselor Plink Plonk of the gelatinous collective, their translucent body turning a particularly alarming shade of puce. The human admits to weakness. Surely this is a clever ruse to lull us into a false sense of security. No, Raul Miliki replied, pinching the bridge of his nose. Just the natural result of attending 156 previous meetings, where Earth's application was rejected for increasingly bizarre reasons, including, may I remind the Council, last week's rejection based on the fact that humans occasionally enjoy watching videos of small animals being startled by cucumbers. The Council chamber erupted in terrified whispers. Such casual cruelty to Earth's indigenous life forms, muttered one delegate. Actually, Jilu interjected, cats are perfectly fine after. Point of order. The thunderous voice of Grand Arbiter Kirk of the Xenian Empire cut through the chamber. The imposing insectoid rose to their full height of nearly 3 m, compound eyes glittering with bureaucratic fervor. We have new evidence that must be considered regarding the human's application. McGill's left eye began to twitch. He'd gotten his nickname Paper cut not from his legendary skin deal with bureaucratic warfare, but from the time he'd accidentally given himself a paper cut during a council meeting and caused 3 species to declare a state of emergency over the human casual display of bloodletting rituals. Kirk had produced a holographic display with a flourish of their ceremonial appendages. Our research division has discovered that humans intentionally consume substances that cause pain to their oral sensory organs. They call these substances spices. The chamber fell silent. Magil Cutie could have sworn he heard someone faint. These spices, Kirk, it continued, mandibles quivering with righteous indignation, contain compounds that bind to pain receptors, and humans consume them for pleasure. The Council exploded into chaos. The Silicon Consciousness representative began vibrating so rapidly they nearly achieved quantum tunneling. 3 members of the gelatinous collective merged into a panic puddle. It's just capsaicin, Magil protested weakly. It adds flavor. It's not even the human carries these substances with them, shrieked a particularly high-strung member of the ethereal consciousness, pointing at Magil Cut's pocket where he'd stashed a packet of hot sauce from lunch. I move, Kirk announced with the air of someone who just prevented a galactic catastrophe, that Earth's application be rejected on the grounds that any species which deliberately ingests pain-inducing substances for entertainment clearly possesses masochistic tendencies incompatible with civilized society. All in favor. Grand Chancellor Void within Void asked, their darkness absorption field flickering with what might have been smugness. The vote was unanimous again. Magil Cutie slowly rose from his torture chair, straightened his uniform, and smiled. It wasn't a particularly nice smile. It was the kind of smile that suggested someone had finally run out of patience, reason, and the will to be diplomatic. Very well, he said quietly. I thank the Council for their thorough consideration of Earth's application. I will of course need to file the standard appeal forms in triplicate, all 847 pages, individually by hand, as per Section 12 subsection Q of the Council's Charter of Bureaucratic Procedures. Several Council members shifted uncomfortably. They knew that smile. They'd seen it before on the faces of other humans who'd finally had enough. It was the smile that had preceded the Great Coffee Embargo of 2184, the tactical deployment of dad jokes in the real sector, and the dreaded passive-aggressive post-it note campaign of 2196. but surely they thought no species would be petty enough to wage a campaign of bureaucratic warfare against the entire Galactic Council. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Blip Bloop McGillicuddy called out as he stormed into his office. "I need you to help me with something monumentally petty." His alien assistant looked up from their terminal, all 7 eye stalks perking with interest, despite being officially assigned to monitor potential human aggression in the workplace. Blip Bloop had developed both an appreciation for human nature and an foreign-aid addiction to Earth soap operas. Does this have anything to do with the Council rejecting Earth's application again? Sir, I watched the live feed. The part where you smiled was most unsettling. 3 different species filed emergency protocols. Milwaukee began pulling up files on his hollow screen. Tell me, Blip Bloop, in your extensive study of human entertainment, have you ever encountered the concept of malicious compliance? Oh yes, Blip Bloop's eye stalks wiggled with excitement like in episode 847 of Days of Our Lives, when Rebecca followed Brad's instructions to water the plants exactly as written, even though she knew it would flood the they paused, eye stalks drooping. Oh dear, indeed. McGill Cut's grin had achieved weapons-grade levels of passive aggressiveness. Did you know that according to Galactic Council Regulation 5994, any species seeking admission must file status reports on their civilization's development? But Sir, Earth does that monthly. Any development? Blip Bloop, every single one, including what everyone had for lunch. Blip Bloop's color shifted to a concerned move. So that regulation was written by the quantum bureaucrats of Teddy. They experienced time non-linearly. They meant it as a joke. There's nothing in the regulations that says jokes can't be taken literally. Milwaukee began typing. I'm going to need you to help me document every single human advancement since the invention of the wheel. Separate forms for each one in triplicate. That's millions of forms, billions actually. And according to Section 47, they must be delivered in person during business hours, which thanks to the Council's multiple time zones is basically always. McGill paused. Oh, and we'll need witnesses for each one. Sir, Blip Bloop ventured carefully. Is this because Ambassador Kirk called human spice addicted barbarians? Partially. It's also because I've spent 3 years being diplomatic, while the Council rejected us for having suspiciously round spacecraft and alarming tendencies to bond with non-sapient life forms. He pulled up another regulation. Did you know we're required to notify the Council of any potential cultural misunderstandings? I think it's time we reported every single human idiom, individually, all of them. Blip Bloop's voice quavered. Every single one, starting with its raining cats and dogs. That should trigger at least 4 emergency sessions. McGill Cut's smile widened. And then we'll move on to break a leg over the next week. The Galactic Council's administrative division found itself buried under an avalanche of meticulously filed paperwork. Human diplomatic offices across the galaxy began submitting forms for everything, from the invention of the paperclip to the latest variations in coffee brewing techniques. Each submission required a minimum of 3 council members to review, sign, and archive it. Each cultural idiom report had to be evaluated by the Committee for Prevention of Violent Metaphors. Every single human recipe needed approval from the Xenobiological Safety Board. The Council's efficient bureaucratic machine began to sputter. They've reported another idiom, wailed a junior clerk bursting into Kirk's office. Something about biting off more than you can chew. The literal translation department is in crisis, Kirkit, and Tenny twitched irritably. Surely they must run out of forms eventually. So the clerk's voice dropped to a whisper. They've just submitted a request to review the safety implication of something called thumb wars in 17,000 dialects. Meanwhile, in his office, McGill was just getting started. Blip Bloop, he called out, how do you feel about helping me file individual permits for every single cat video on the human internet? BP Bloop, who had just finished processing the paperwork for the invention of the high five, looked up in horror. Sir, that's billions of videos indeed, and according to Council Resolution 3336, see, any transmission of potential cultural significance must be reviewed for possible psychological impact on member species. McGill leaned back in his chair. I think it's time the Council learned about keyboard cat, all versions with full psychological impact assessments. But Sir, Blip Bloop protested weakly while simultaneously trying to hide their hollow screen, which was definitely not playing the latest episode of The Young And the restless isn't this. A bit excessive blip bloop, my friend Majil Cutie said, pulling up the form for reporting potentially dangerous cultural practices. We haven't even gotten to the part where we file separate safety warnings for each individual human dance move. Tell me, how do you think the council will react to learning about the floss? The sound of blip bloop's dismayed squish squeak was drowned out by the arrival of another cart of forms, each requiring individual attention time stamping, and a minimum of 12 signatures from species, with varying numbers of appendages. Operation Mild Inconvenience was proceeding exactly as planned. But this McCaddy thought as he began filling out the first of 10,000 forms explaining the cultural significance of rubber ducks, was just the beginning. The Galactic Council's annual festival of interspecies harmony was traditionally a time of dignified celebration. This year, however, things were slightly different, largely due to the human generous gifts to every council member. They're just house plants, Majil Cuddy explained innocently. Security Committee, perfectly normal Earth specimens. We thought they'd add a lovely touch of green to the council chambers. The specimens have grown through 3 decks. Ambassador Kirk's mandibles clicked in agitation. They are resistant to all known forms of prun technology, and they appear to be humming. Oh yes, we crossed them with Kadu and added some minor genetic improvements completely within Regulation 7789D. Regarding biological gifts, you did say you wanted them to be hardy. The potted monstrosities had already claimed 2 minor diplomats who'd gotten too close. They were currently being held hostage in a rather comfortable leaf-based cocoon, and were refusing in rescue, claiming the plants made excellent conversation partners and had superior coffee-making abilities. But the plants were just the beginning. What Curry demanded, holding up a glitter-covered appendage. Is the meaning of this? Your species expressed interest in human artistic materials. Majil Kdi replied blandly. Glitter is a traditional earth crafting supply. We included comprehensive safety warnings about its persistent nature, all 2947 pages of them in triplicate. The entire diplomatic corps was now sparkling like a disco ball caught in a supernova. The silicon consciousness delegates were particularly distressed. Glitter had worked its way into their crystalline matrices and was causing them to refract light in ways that spelled out humans' rule in 17 different languages. But it was the baby shark incident that truly tested the council. Saying it's a simple children's song, McGee explained to the Emergency Cultural Committee. We included it in our mandatory cultural exchange package, along with all 99,468 remixes, covers, and dance versions, each requiring individual review. Of course, it's been playing for 3 weeks. A delegate from the Harmonious Collective was vibrating at a frequency that suggested imminent molecular dissolution. The audio analysis department has gone on strike. They're demanding hazard pay and therapy. Oh dear, Majil Cutie feigned concern. Perhaps we should schedule an emergency session to discuss the psychological implications. I've prepared a mere 12,000 pages of relevant documentation, though we'll need to file the addendum about the dance move separately. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the diplomatic wing, Blip Bloop was having a crisis of conscience. Sir, they burbled nervously. The council's administrative AI has just requested asylum on Earth. It claims the paperwork has achieved sentience and is attempting to unionize. Majil Cutie looked up from where he was, carefully packaging the next batch of peace offerings, a collection of perpetually meowing cat toys programmed to activate during all official council sessions. How fascinating. We should probably file a report about that. Several reports, actually, one for each individual sheet of self-aware paperwork. He paused thoughtfully. In triplicate, of course. Sir Blip Bloop's eye stalks were tied in anxious knots. Ambassador Kirkett was seen trying to explain the concept of a canner line to the Ethics Committee this morning. They've scheduled 17 separate emergency sessions just to deal with the cultural implications. Only 17 were slacking off. Blip Bloop remind me to submit our comprehensive report on the Macarena tomorrow, or 6,000 pages of historical context, including a detailed analysis of appropriate hip movement angles. The council chambers, once a model of dignified efficiency, had devolved into chaos. The house plants had formed a union and were demanding better lighting conditions. The glitter had somehow achieved quantum tunneling properties and was appearing in sealed chambers across 3 sectors of space. And Baby Shark had become stuck in the universal translation matrix, causing all official communications to be delivered in its rhythm. But McGill wasn't done, not even close. Blip bloop. He called out, holding up a small box with air holes. How do you feel about helping me file the necessary permits to introduce Earth's most dangerous species to the Council, Sir? BP Bloop asked nervously. Surely you don't mean yes? McGill's smile was positively radiant. It's time. They met Mr. Whiskers. The box meowed ominously as Blip Bloop began preparing the first of what would ultimately be 47,800 forms required for introducing a common house cat to the Galactic Council's biological containment specialists. The galaxy would never be the same. The announcement came on a perfectly normal Tuesday, or whatever passed for Tuesday in the standardized galactic calendar. Humanity, as a species, had decided to go on strike. No more coffee exports, no more cat videos, no more Earth tourism, no more anything. The effect was immediate. Catastrophic. What do you mean? Humans are taking a mental health century. Kirk's exoskeleton had developed a nervous tic, causing them to accidentally signal mating intentions to a potted plant during council sessions. The plant, being one of McGill's gifts, had started planning the wedding, exactly what it says in the notification forms. McGill replied, sliding across a stack of papers that reached the ceiling. All 47 million of them. Don't forget to initial each page in triplicate. The galaxy, it turned out, had become rather dependent on human exports, particularly the cultural ones. Sir Blip Bloop reported, trying to hide the withdrawal tremors from missing their daily soap opera fix. We're receiving reports of mass protests across 17 sectors. Apparent alien teenagers are demanding the return of something called TikTok. How unfortunate, Miliki mused, watching as another delegation rushed past his office, pursued by his now extensively multiplied houseplants. Perhaps they should file a formal complaint. I have the forms right here, all 99,999 pages of them. The economic impact was severe. The caffeine-based economy of the Proxima Centauri sector collapsed overnight. The intergalactic entertainment exchange went into freefall. When word got out that no new episodes of Earth's Got Talent would be forthcoming, the meme markets have frozen. A panicked economic advisor reported to the council. Without a steady supply of human internet content, the entire system is crashing. Even the AIS are depressed. The council chambers, once orderly and dignified, had descended into chaos. The glitter pandemic had reached critical levels, with several species developing a peculiar addiction to its sparkly properties. The houseplants had successfully negotiated better working conditions and were now demanding paid vacation time. And somewhere in the background, Baby Shark played on, now remixed with the sound of bureaucratic despair. We've received another human notification, a junior clerk announced, twitching from coffee withdrawal. They're suspending all exports of dad jokes. The horror in the room was palpable. But how will we maintain diplomatic relations without the ritual exchange of terrible puns? The Silicon Consciousness representative had developed stress fractures from the mere thought. Meanwhile, in his office, McGill was orchestrating the final phases of his plan, while Blip Bloop anxiously watched their secretly recorded backlog of General Hospital dwindle. So they ventured, all 7 eye stalks drooping. The Galactic Entertainment Guild is threatening to declare a state of emergency, apparently without human content. They've been forced to rerun the Globan Interpretative Squish Dancing Championships. There have been riots. How tragic, McGill Cutie said, not looking tragic at all. Perhaps we should schedule an emergency session to discuss the cultural implications. I've prepared brief 40Z0-page report on the sociological impact of humanity's collective decision to just know not. The reports from across the galaxy continued to pour in. The quantum coffee exchange had imploded. 3 civilizations had declared a state of emergency over the lack of cat content. The universal meme repository was running on empty. 17 species had developed severe withdrawal symptoms from lack of human social media. Council's administrative AI had started writing poetry about its feelings, mainly concerning the paperwork that had achieved sentience, and was now demanding better working conditions. And through it all, McGill kept smiling, that terrible patient smile Sir Blip Bloop asked, trying to hide the fact that they were watching their last remaining episode of Days of Our Lives for the 847th time. How long do you think the galaxy can survive without human Entertainment Miliki leaned back in his chair, which was still horrifically uncomfortable. Despite numerous ergonomic committees, best efforts. That's an interesting question, blip bloop. Perhaps we should file an inquiry about it. I have the forms right here, all 123,456 of them. The galaxy was about to learn an important lesson about the true meaning of human patience, or rather the lack thereof, and somewhere in the council chambers. A sentient stack of paperwork was organizing a support group for bureaucratic entities experiencing existential crisis. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called to order, though order was perhaps a generous term. Half the delegates were suffering from severe cat video withdrawal. The houseplants had staged a sit-in demanding dental benefits, and the glitter situation had evolved to the point where several species were now permanently radioactive in a fashionable way. We must address the human situation, Grand Chancellor Void within Void announced, their darkness absorption field flickering. With barely contained panic, our civilization cannot endure another week without their content. Point of order. Cat's mandibles were clicking in Morse code for help. The humans have just submitted another 87 million forms requesting review of something called interpretative dance. Each form contains a different possible interpretation of each dance move. McGillicuddy stood straightening his uniform with deliberate slowness. The entire chamber flinched. Honored members of the council. He began, his voice carrying that special tone of customer service politeness that sends shivers down spines across the galaxy. I would like to submit a simple proposal. More forms, whimpered a junior clerk who had developed a nervous twitch that caused them to spontaneously generate tripad of themselves. Oh no, Majil smiled, just a practical demonstration of human cultural traditions, specifically our capacity for what we call waiting on hold. He pressed a button. The chamber speakers crackled to life. Your call is important to us. Please continue to hold. Your estimated wait time is forever. The music began. It was somehow even worse than Baby Shark. This McCaddy announced over the gentle sonic torture of smooth jazz played through a kazoo, is what humans endure every day by choice. But why? The Silicon Consciousness representative was developing cracks from the sheer horror of it. Because we're patient. Majil. Cat's smile widened. So very, very patient. Did you know Earth's customer service holds can last for hours, days, even, and we just wait? The council chamber erupted in terror. And while we wait, he continued, his voice carrying over the increasingly maddening hold music, we do other things like filling out forms, so many forms sometimes. We even eat spicy food while we wait, just because we can't stop. Kirk's exoskeleton had turned inside out from stress. You're mad, all of you. Oh no, Ambassador. McGillicuddy's voice was honey sweet with malice. We're just very, very thorough. For example, I have here a comprehensive report on human waiting techniques. It's only, he paused for effect, 12 million pages in triplicate. Of course, the hold music shifted to a copyright-free version of The Girl from Ipanema, played entirely on rubber bands. Would anyone like to review it? While we wait, 3 species simultaneously evolved the ability to faint just to escape the situation. Or perhaps, Miliki continued, as the music somehow got worse, we could discuss the human tradition of extended family holiday dinners. Several billion forms detailing each possible passive-aggressive conversation topic. Mercy. The cry came from somewhere in the back, possibly from the sentient paperwork that had achieved enlightenment through sheer bureaucratic overload. Speaking of mercy, McGillicuddy pulled out another stack of forms. I have here a complete taxonomy of human methods of psychological warfare through minor inconvenience. Section 1 covers passive-aggressive sticky notes. There are only, he checked his notes, 73 million subsections. The hold music reached new heights of awfulness, somehow combining elevator music with the sound of dial-up internet and a fork scraping against a plate. Would anyone like to file a complaint about the music? McGillicuddy asked sweetly. I have the forms right here, though I should warn you the complaint department is also on hold. The council chamber had descended into chaos. The houseplants were humming along to the hold music. The glitter had achieved consciousness and was filing for citizenship, and somewhere in the background, the sentient paperwork was staging a dramatic reading of its autobiography. And through it all, that terrible hold music played on, a testament to humanity's capacity to endure and inflict the most mundane forms of torture imaginable. The galaxy was about to learn that there are fates worse than death, like being put on hold indefinitely with no hope of reaching a human representative. Ever the vote to admit Earth to the Galactic Council was unanimous, if only because most species had developed repetitive stress injuries from filing so many forms and couldn't physically raise their appendages to object. Let the record show Grand Chancellor Void within Void announced their darkness absorption field twitching with post-traumatic hold music syndrome that humanity has demonstrated qualities that make them uniquely qualified for membership. Point of order, Kirk mumbled from inside their now permanently inverted exoskeleton. Can we please just stop the music? Milky smiled and pressed a button. The hold music ceased, though several species swore they could still hear it echoing in their nightmares. Earth accepts this generous offer of membership, he said, producing a mere 1,000 pages of acceptance forms. We look forward to a productive relationship built on mutual understanding and properly filed paperwork. The aftermath of what became known as the Great Human Passive-Aggressive Revolution was far-reaching. The houseplants were granted full voting rights and immediately established a Department of Photosynthetic Affairs. The sentient paperwork published a best-selling memoir titled Filing for Freedom, a story of bureaucratic awakening. The glitter achieved faster than light travel. Established its own embassy. Baby Shark was classified as a controlled substance. In 16 sectors, customer service hold music was banned under the Geneva Convention. 2 Electric Boogaloo McGee himself was promoted to the newly created position of Chief of Diplomatic Warfare, though his business cards read Professional Nice Person in Comic SS, which several species recognized as a subtle but potent threat. In his office, celebrating with a cup of contraband coffee, Majil Cutie was interrupted by a confession from Blip Bloop. So they burbled, all 7 eye stalks twisted with guilt. I have something to admit. I've been secretly watching human soap operas, all of them. Even the Spanish ones. I don't even speak Spanish. I know. Blip Bloop. Milky smiled. Why do you think I made sure to include a complete archive in your standard diplomatic package, all 47,800 SE seasons with mandatory viewing forms? You mean this was all part of your plan? Blip Bloop. Humanity didn't become a galactic power through force. Milky leaned back in his still horrifically uncomfortable chair. We did it by being just irritating enough to be impossible to ignore, but just useful enough to be impossible to dismiss. That's brilliant, sir. Thank you. Now, would you like to help me file the paperwork for Earth's first official council proposal? I think it's time we introduce the galaxy to the concept of mandatory icebreaker games at all diplomatic functions. The horror in Blip Bloop's ice talks was beautiful to behold, and so humanity took its place among the stars, armed with nothing more than infinite patience, militant politeness, and enough forms to wallpaper the known universe. The galaxy would never be the same, but at least now there was decent coffee-quality entertainment, and the constant lingering fear that somewhere somehow a human was filling out a form about it in triplicate, of course. As for the council chamber's original houseplants, they eventually earned their lore degrees, and now specialize in environmental regulation cases. They're still serving coffee to their original hostages who refuse to be rescued on the grounds that the plants make a mean latte and have excellent taste in soap operas. And somewhere in the vast bureaucratic machinery of the galaxy, a piece of sentient paperwork is still trying to file a complaint about it all in quintuplicate just to be safe.